summer too soon this year, before spring could finish its last song. The cherry blossoms barely held on against warm wind and restless nights. April disappeared like soft jazz, playing quietly in another room, beautiful for only a moment, then fading before we noticed. The city changed almost overnight, cold drinks replacing hot coffee, thin jackets forgotten by doorways, and midnight air turning heavy. We met summer too soon, before the river breeze could linger, before rainy cafes and slow walks had enough time to become memories. Tonight Seoul glows warmer somehow, neon lights trembling on wet pavement, taxi headlights crossing intersections like distant stars moving through heat. A muted trumpet cries softly from somewhere above the alleyways, its lonely notes floating downward across sleepless apartment windows. I walk beside the Han River slowly, listening to old jazz through earphones, trying to hold on to the feeling of spring before it disappeared completely. We met summer too soon, and maybe that's why it hurts beautifully, because short seasons leave behind the deepest echoes in our hearts. I remember subway rides after rain, coffee steam against cold hands, cherry blossoms caught in city wind, and jazz bars hidden underground. Now warm air fills every corner, even after midnight arrives. The city breathing heavier each evening as summer settles over everything. A woman stood outside a convenience store, watching traffic beneath humid skies. Her expression looked distant somehow, like someone quietly missing spring. Inside a small basement cafe, an old vinyl record kept spinning. Brush drums, upright bass, soft trumpet, turning loneliness into something warm. We met summer too soon, but tonight I finally understand. Maybe seasons aren't meant to stay, only to leave us small, beautiful moments. The first light of dawn appeared slowly, blue shadows crossing empty streets, and somewhere beyond crowded rooftops, a final cool breeze passed quietly. The trumpet solo faded gently, like spring saying goodbye one last time, while the city moved toward another summer, bright, sleepless, and endless again. We met summer too soon this year. Still, I think I'll remember it forever. Every warm, lonely night from now on will carry traces of this disappearing spring.
still be time for slow afternoons and light jackets. But the wind changed overnight, and suddenly the city felt different. The cherry blossoms disappeared before I even took a photo. The streets I walked every evening already smell like summer rain. People started holding ice drinks. The cafes turned their air conditioners on. And somewhere between two sleepless weeks, spring quietly packed its bags. Spring left before I noticed, like someone leaving without goodbye. One moment the air was soft and silver, then suddenly July arrived. The jazz playing in the corner cafe still sounded like April somehow. Warm trumpet floating through speakers while heat gathered outside the window. I remember crossing the Han River, feeling cold wind on my sleeves. Now even midnight feels warmer, like the city forgot how to breathe slowly. Maybe every year becomes shorter, maybe memories melt too fast. Or maybe growing older means you notice disappearing things more. Spring left before I noticed, like pages turning too quickly. I kept waiting for one more cool evening, but summer was already here. Still I keep this season carefully inside unfinished songs and cafes, because some goodbyes are too quiet to notice until they are gone. Tonight the neon lights feel brighter, the trains sound tired again, and somewhere beyond the apartment windows a small breeze still remembers spring. So before another season disappears, I'll stay here a little longer, listening to old jazz records and watching warm rain fall slowly. The cafe still smelled like spring, even though summer filled the streets. Coffee rain and old wooden tables holding on to a disappearing season. Outside, warm wind moved slowly through neon reflections after rain. But inside, the jazz stayed gentle, like April refusing to leave. A trumpet floated through the speakers, soft enough to quiet the room. And for a while nobody spoke loudly, as if everyone missed spring too. The cafe still smelled like spring, Wet jackets and fresh coffee beans, even the air felt softer there than the restless city outside. I sat near the fogged-up window, watching buses pass through rain, office lights glowing above sidewalks still crowded after midnight. The owner wiped glasses quietly while an old vinyl kept spinning. Its tiny crackling sound somehow made loneliness feel beautiful. The cafe still smelled like spring, like cool evenings beside the river, like conversations that lasted longer before summer arrived too early. I remember carrying thin cardigans through streets filled with cherry blossoms, subway stations cold after sunset, and jazz bars hidden underground. Now warm nights come too quickly, the city breathing heavier each week. Even midnight feels brighter somehow under sleepless apartment lights. A girl opened the cafe door slowly, rain following her into the room. For a second the cool air returned, like spring visiting one last time. The trumpet solo kept crying softly over brush drums and upright bass, and suddenly every small memory felt close enough to touch again. The cafe still smelled like spring, even as the rain turned warmer. Maybe some places hold seasons longer, refusing to let them disappear. Outside, taxis cross shining streets, their lights trembling on wet pavement, while somewhere beyond the rooftops summer waited impatiently again. So let this record keep turning until the final song fades away, because nights like this become memories before we even realize they're ending. And when I stepped back outside into humid midnight air, the smell of coffee stayed with me long after the rain disappeared. Tonight might be the last cool breeze before summer settles over the city. The kind of air that touches your sleeves and quietly slows your thoughts down. I stood beside the hand river, holding coffee that had gone cold, watching reflections shake softly under bridges full of tired lights. The cherry blossoms are gone now, only green leaves remain, but somehow their absence lingers, like a song still echoing after midnight. The last cool breeze tonight feels like spring saying goodbye, without dramatic words or tears, just silence moving through warm streets. A trumpet floated from somewhere, maybe a rooftop bar nearby. Soft notes drifting above traffic, like memories refusing to disappear. Couples walk slowly near the river, laughing under pale street lights, while I stayed behind a little longer, listening to the city breathe. The last cool breeze tonight makes everything feel temporary. Even the skyline looks softer before another endless summer begins. Subway stations, then jackets damp from evening showers, cafes glowing against cold windows, and jazz records spinning quietly. Now the nights arrive warmer, the pavement holding heat until dawn, and air conditioners hum softly through apartment walls after midnight. Maybe this is why I love jazz, because it stays gentle and slow, even when the world rushes forward, even when seasons disappear too fast. Trumpet solo kept playing, as if trying to hold on to spring, long enough for one more memory before summer takes the sky completely. The last cool breeze tonight feels almost impossible now, something rare and disappearing, like handwritten letters or old cafes. So I stayed near the river longer, letting the wind move around me, trying not to think about tomorrow or how quickly beautiful things leave. And somewhere beyond the dark water, past neon lights and sleepless windows, I think spring quietly smiled once before fading into another summer night. Petals on the subway window, sticking softly after the rain. The train moved through the dark city, while spring quietly slipped away. Everyone looked tired tonight, phones glowing in silent hands. And outside the blurred glass windows, warm wind drifted through so slowly. The girl beside me closed her eyes, listening to music I couldn't hear. But somehow the rhythm of the train felt like an old jazz record spinning. Petals on the subway window, small memories disappearing quickly. Before I could even hold them, summer was already waiting outside. The station air felt warmer now, even after midnight arrived. Convenience stores shining brightly under streets still awake with heat. I remember colder evenings, coffee cups warming both my hands, thin jackets carrying spring rain, and long quiet rides home alone. Now the city feels louder somehow, faster lights and shorter seasons. Cherry blossoms gone too suddenly, like conversations ending halfway. On the subway window, fading slowly with every station, like unfinished thoughts drifting away into tunnels full of warm air. A muted trumpet played softly through my old wired earphones, and for a moment the moving train felt slower than the passing year. Across the glass apartment windows flickered like distant stories, people eating late dinners quietly under television's glowing blue. Maybe that's why nights like this always stay inside my memory, because ordinary moments become beautiful right before they disappear. Petals on the subway window, one last sign of spring remaining, before humid nights take over and summer fills the entire city. The final station arrived quietly, doors opening with tired sounds, and as I stepped into warm midnight air, one petal still clung to the glass. I watched the train disappear slowly into another sleepless tunnel, thinking maybe every season leaves behind a few small things we almost miss. Just one more night before summer, before the city forgets spring completely. before warm air settles over everything and the river loses its cool silence. Tonight the streets still feel halfway gentle, not cold, not fully warm yet. Like the season itself is hesitating at the edge of another goodbye. I walked without choosing a destination, past cafes glowing after rain, past quiet bars playing old jazz records, into streets that smelled faintly of flowers. One more night before summer, one more slow song after midnight, one more chance to stay outside without rushing back home too quickly. The trumpet inside my earphones sounded softer than usual tonight, its lonely notes drifting through neon lights, like memories refusing to fade away. At the convenience store corner, people stood eating melting ice cream, laughing beneath humid April skies as if summer had already arrived. But somewhere in the moving wind, I could still feel traces of spring, small and fading, but beautiful, like perfume left behind on old clothes. One more night before summer, before sleepless heat fills the city, before air conditioners start humming through every apartment after dark. I remember colder evenings clearly, thin jackets brushing against subway doors, coffee warming both my hands, and jazz bars hidden underground. Now even midnight feels brighter, the streets louder and more restless, taxi lights trembling across wet pavement, while warm rain gathers above Seoul. An old couple cross the intersection slowly, holding a single umbrella together, and somehow that quiet scene made the whole night feel cinematic. One more night before summer, maybe that's why I don't wanna sleep, because beautiful things disappear fastest right before we learn to love them fully. Reflected distant lights like scattered pieces of another season, and the city breathed around me softly, tired, warm, but still alive somehow. So let this trumpet keep playing until the sky slowly turns blue. One final toast to springtime before summer takes the night away. The Han River feels different tonight. too warm for the middle of April. No cold wind brushing past my sleeves, only soft heat rising from the water. Bicycles pass beneath the bridge, people laughing with iced coffees. And somewhere far across the river, apartment lights blink like tired stars. I came here looking for spring, for pale skies and quiet air. But summer reached the city early, before the flowers could truly stay. And river without spring feels strangely lonely tonight, like hearing your favorite jazz song play too fast to fully feel. Convenience store near the park still glows softly after midnight. Office workers sit beside the railing, watching boats disappear slowly. A muted trumpet cries gently through my old headphones tonight, its lonely notes floating above traffic, like memories drifting across water. And river without spring, no chilly breeze after sunset, no cold coffee cups in both hands, no long jackets moving in the wind. I remember slower years somehow, rain falling on quiet sidewalks, subway windows fogged from warm breath, and jazz leaking from basement cafes. Now the air feels heavier, earlier, even the nights seem restless. Trees already deep green beside the river, as if May disappeared overnight. A couple sits quietly nearby, sharing silence more than words. And somehow that small moment feels softer than the whole city. And river without spring, maybe that's why I stay longer, trying to hold on to something fading before summer takes everything fully. The last train crosses the bridge slowly, reflections trembling beneath it. Warm wind moving through empty benches and neon signs shining on the water. Tonight the city won't sleep easily, too bright and too warm somehow. But this trumpet keeps whispering gently, like spring refusing to leave completely. And river without spring, still beautiful in its own way, because even disappearing seasons leave traces behind in music. So let this night stretch quietly, like final spinning after midnight, before another summer morning arrives, and these small feelings fade away. Even the rain felt warmer tonight, falling softly onto neon streets. April used to carry colder storms, but summer arrived too early again. Umbrellas moved through the crosswalk slowly, reflections shaking beneath their feet. And somewhere above the city skyline, thunder rolled like distant jazz drums. I stopped inside a small cafe to wait for the rain to calm down, but the windows fogged up quietly, like old memories returning again. Even the rain felt warmer, like spring was already fading. The season barely touched the city before dissolving into humid nights. A trumpet cried through hidden speakers, soft enough to slow the room. People stared into cooling coffees without saying much at all. Outside, buses crossed wet streets, their headlights floating across puddles, and warm rain kept falling steadily against apartment windows after midnight. I remember springs from years ago, cold rain soaking through thin jackets, subway stations smelling like umbrellas, and jazz bars glowing underground. Now the nights breathe differently, heavier, somehow less patient. Even the rain carries warmth as if July arrived too soon. Even the rain felt warmer, but somehow more lonely too, because disappearing seasons leave behind feelings you can't fully explain. The owner turned the vinyl slowly, static crackling between trumpet notes. And for a moment time moved softer inside that dim little cafe. A woman near the doorway smiled faintly, watching rain slide down the glass. Her iced coffee already half melted, though it was only April still. Maybe the world keeps speeding forward without waiting for small seasons, leaving quiet people behind, still searching for slower evenings. Even the rain felt warmer as I stepped back into the city. Taxi lights trembling through puddles, warm wind moving beside the river. The storm began fading toward dawn, leaving streets glossy and silent. And somewhere between rain and sunrise, I realized spring had already gone. Still, this trumpet keeps playing, gentle enough to hold memories long after cherry blossoms disappear into another sleepless summer. Maybe spring was just passing through, never planning to stay very long. A quiet guest moving through the city before summer took the room again. The cherry blossoms came suddenly and disappeared into warm wind, like pages turning too quickly before I could finish reading them. Tonight the streets feel heavier, humid lights above tired buildings, and somewhere beyond the river a small cool breeze still survives. Spring was just passing through, like jazz drifting from an open window, beautiful for a little while, then gone before morning arrives. I walk past the old record shop, its lights still glowing softly. A trumpet echoed down the alleyway, slow enough to stop my thoughts. Inside, strangers sat quietly, holding cups that had gone cold. Nobody rushed to leave yet, as if everyone missed spring too. Spring was just passing through, leaving small memories behind. Rain on subway windows at night, thin jackets moving in soft wind. I remember colder evenings clearly, coffee steam against my hands, long conversations beside the river, and trains humming after midnight. Now the city sounds different, air conditioners filling the silence, warm pavement after dark, and sleepless windows glowing blue. A cup across the intersection, slowly sharing one umbrella without speaking. And somehow that tiny moment felt softer than the entire season. Spring was just passing through. Maybe that's why it hurts beautifully, because short seasons leave deeper traces than the ones that stay too long. Trumpet solo kept floating upward over brush drums and quiet traffic, like the city itself was remembering something already disappearing. I stood beneath fading neon lights, listening to warm rain nearby, trying to hold on to the feeling before summer erased it completely. Spring was just passing through, but tonight I can still feel it inside old jazz melodies and streets that refuse to sleep. So let this record keep spinning until dawn washes the sky pale, because even passing seasons deserve one last slow song before goodbye. Goodbye to the windy evenings, the kind that made the city feel lighter. Cool air drifting through open cafés before summer filled every street. The river carried softer sounds than bicycles passing after sunset. Jazz floating from rooftop bars and conversations moving slowly. Now the nights arrive warmer, too quickly, too brightly somehow. Even midnight feels awake under endless apartment lights. Goodbye to the windy evenings, to thin jackets and quiet walks, to cherry blossoms caught in subway wind and rain tapping softly on umbrellas. I stayed outside longer tonight, trying to remember the feeling, that small cold breeze against my hands, before it disappears completely. A muted trumpet cried somewhere from a hidden basement jazz bar, its lonely melody rising upward into humid neon skies. Inside, strangers sat quietly, watching ice melt inside their glasses. Nobody really spoke much, but somehow the silence felt warm. Goodbye to the windy evenings, they never stayed long enough. Beautiful things always seem to leave right when we start needing them most. Crossing the Han River, late trains humming through the dark, coffee steam against station windows, and jackets carrying traces of rain. Now warm air clings to the pavement, even after the last bus leaves, and the city breathes differently, restless beneath sleepless lights. A couple laugh near the intersection, holding one umbrella together, their shadows trembling on wet streets like scenes from an old film. The trumpet solo kept unfolding slowly over brushed drums and a bright bass, and suddenly the whole city felt softer than usual tonight. Goodbye to the windy evenings, to seasons that pass too quickly, to nights that smelled faintly of spring, and songs that sounded better after rain. Maybe that's why I keep walking long after midnight arrives, trying to hold on to small moments before summer carries them away. The first hint of dawn appeared quietly, blue light touching distant rooftops, and somewhere beyond the sleeping river, one last cool breeze moved through Seoul. Goodbye to the windy evenings, still I know I'll remember them every time a lonely trumpet plays on another warm summer night. Spring became the season I couldn't hold. slipped through my hands too quietly. One moment the wind felt gentle, and suddenly the nights turned warm. The cherry blossoms barely stayed, just enough to leave memories behind. Petals floating across wet sidewalks before disappearing into neon rain. I kept thinking there would be more time, more slow evenings beside the river, more coffee cooling near open windows, more jazz drifting through midnight cafes. The season I couldn't hold still lingers somewhere inside me, like a trumpet echo after the song ends, soft, lonely, and impossible to forget. Tonight the city feels restless, warm lights glowing above apartment towers, air conditioners humming through the silence, even though it's only spring on the calendar. I walked without speaking much past convenience stores and quiet bars, watching strangers move through warm wind like everyone was chasing something invisible. Inside a basement jazz cafe, an old vinyl record kept spinning. Its tiny crackling sound somehow made the room feel slower than time. The season I couldn't hold was never loud or dramatic, just small beautiful moments leaving before I noticed them fully. I remember colder subway rides, thin jackets damp from light rain, hands wrapped around paper coffee cups, and long songs playing after midnight. Now even the rain feels different, warmer against the city streets, as if summer has been waiting nearby, impatient for spring to disappear. A woman sat near the corner window, watching traffic through fogged glass. Her expression looked strangely familiar, like someone missing something unnamed. Trumpet solo rose softly above brush drums and upright bass, and suddenly every passing season felt connected to this one lonely night. The season I couldn't hold still breathes inside old melodies, inside river wind after midnight, inside quiet streets after rain. Maybe beautiful things aren't meant to stay. Maybe that's why they matter more, because disappearing moments teach us how to listen carefully. So let this jazz continue slowly until dawn begins touching the windows before another endless summer arrives and carries these feelings away again. Forecast said 28 degrees in the middle of April again. Cherry blossoms shaking in hot wind, like they arrived in the wrong season. People fill the riverside tonight, wearing short sleeves under pink trees. Cold drinks melting on small cafe tables before the sun even disappears. The city skips spring once more, straight into humid evenings. And somehow the petals look lonely, falling beside glowing neon signs. Cherry blossoms in a heat wave, blooming too fast to remember. The nights used to feel softer, now even the breeze feels warm. Past the old record shop, jazz floating onto the sidewalk, a trumpet crying through open windows like it missed April too. The owner quietly smiled at me, said spring doesn't stay long anymore, then turned the vinyl slowly as petals blew across the street. Cherry blossoms in a heat wave, beautiful but disappearing quickly, like photographs fading in sunlight before we even frame them. At the convenience store near midnight, teenagers laughed beside the freezer, while exhausted office lights flickered above streets still holding warmth. I miss those colder spring nights, thin coats and quiet conversations, long walks without sweating through memories, slow air drifting above the river. But every year feels faster now, seasons changing without warning. And maybe that's why tonight feels precious, because nothing stays very long. Cherry blossoms in a heat wave, still trying to dance beautifully, even while summer waits impatiently beyond the edge of April sky. So let this jazz keep playing until the last petals disappear. One final toast to springtime before another endless summer begins. So suddenly became summer, almost overnight somehow. Yesterday I still wore long sleeves, tonight the air feels completely different. The river breeze lost its coolness, cherry blossoms already gone, and cafes started serving iced drinks before spring could settle down. Warm wind moved through the alleys, carrying distant traffic sounds. Neon reflections on wet pavement look brighter than they should in April. So suddenly became summer without asking anyone first, like a song changing tempo halfway, before the melody can finish. At the convenience store near midnight, the freezer doors kept opening. Office workers stood silently outside, holding cold cans against tired hands. A trumpet played through my earphones, slow enough to remember spring, while humid air wrapped around buildings still glowing after the last train. I miss those colder evenings already, thin jackets and quiet cafes, long walks beside the Han River before the nights turned heavy. Now even midnight feels restless, the city breathing warmer and louder, apartment windows flickering softly like sleepless stars above the streets. So suddenly became summer, and somehow that makes me lonely, because beautiful things disappear fastest before we even notice them leaving. An old jazz record spins slowly inside a basement cafe tonight. The owner wipes empty tables quietly as warm rain touches the windows. Outside, taxis cross the intersection like yellow lights floating through heat. And somewhere beyond crowded rooftops, a small breeze still remembers spring. Maybe seasons are becoming shorter, or maybe we forgot how to pause. But tonight I wanna stay awake long enough to feel this moment fully. Oh, so suddenly became summer. Still I keep searching for spring inside fading trumpet melodies and quiet streets after midnight. So let this night move slowly before another season disappears. Because even warm, lonely evenings become memories faster every year. Nobody wore cardigans long enough. The spring disappeared too quickly. The light jackets stayed by the doorway, waiting for colder evenings that never came. Cherry blossoms arrived for a moment, then vanished into sudden warm nights. The city skips softly into summer without even slowing down once. At the cafe near the station, the window stayed open tonight. Warm air carrying distant traffic, and jazz floating above quiet conversations. Nobody wore cardigans long enough to fall in love with spring again before we noticed the season changing. The nights already felt like June. A girl walked past with iced coffee, her sleeves rolled up in April wind, and somehow that small scene made the whole evening feel lonely. Springs differently, rain tapping softly against umbrellas, cold subway seats after midnight, and coffee steam clouding the windows. Now air conditioners hum everywhere, even before May properly begins. And the city glows a little brighter under restless, humid neon lights. Nobody wore cardigans long enough to keep those slow evenings alive, the kind where people stayed outside without checking the time constantly. A muted trumpet played upstairs inside the old jazz bar tonight, its lonely melody drifting downward like petals floating through warm streets. The river breeze feels weaker now, still beautiful, but somehow changed, like a familiar song remastered, too clean to hurt the same way. Maybe seasons are becoming shorter because the world moves too quickly. Or maybe growing older means you notice disappearing things more deeply. Nobody wore cardigans long enough, still I keep mine hanging nearby, like proof that spring existed once, even if only for a little while. Tonight the city won't sleep early, warm lights filling apartment windows, and somewhere beyond crowded rooftops a small cool breeze still survives. So let this jazz record continue, one more song before dawn arrives, before summer settles completely across the sleepless streets of Seoul. The thin jacket I bought in March still hangs beside the doorway. I thought this spring would stay longer, but warm nights arrived too soon. Cherry blossoms disappeared quietly without even waiting for rain, and the playlists made for springtime already sound like old memories. Tonight the cafe stayed open late, soft jazz floating through dim lights. People stared silently at their phones while warm wind touched the windows. Thin jackets and goodbye songs, that's all the season left behind. A few cool evenings by the river and unfinished conversations at midnight. The city feels heavier lately, like summer pressing against the streets. Air conditioners humming everywhere before spring could properly breathe. I walk past the old cinema poster shaking in warm wind, and somewhere a lonely trumpet played like it missed spring too. Thin jackets and goodbye songs, moments disappearing too quickly, like coffee growing cold beside me before I even take a sip. Maybe every year becomes shorter as life keeps moving moving too fast. Or maybe we only notice seasons when they're already leaving us. I still remember older springs, long rainy afternoons in cafes, wearing light coats until late May, listening to jazz near fogged windows. Now April feels like a memory, even before the month is over, and summer waits impatiently behind every bright neon night. The last train crossed the bridge slowly, reflections shaking on the river, warm air rising from the pavement while jazz echoed through my earphones. Ooh, thin jackets and goodbye songs. Tonight they feel strangely beautiful, because the shortest seasons always leave the deepest feelings. So let this record keep spinning a little longer before dawn, before summer fills every corner and these quiet nights disappear. Before the air turned heavy, the city used to breathe softly. Late spring wind through open cafes and pale skies above the river. For a little while, everything felt slower. Subway lights after light rain, coffee steam against cold windows. But suddenly warm nights arrive, like summer skipping ahead again. People rolling up their sleeves while cherry blossoms disappeared silently. Before the air turned heavy, I wanted one more quiet evening, one more walk without sweating memories, one more jazz song beside the river. Bookstore stayed open tonight, soft trumpet filling empty corners. Outside, humid neon lights flickered across streets still awake at midnight. A couple laughed near the crosswalk, holding melting iced coffees, and somehow that small scene made spring feel farther away. Before the air turned heavy, the nights carried softer feelings. Words stayed longer in conversations, and silence felt warmer somehow. Now everything moves too quickly, even seasons rush past us. April became a passing station on the way to another summer. I still remember colder breezes running through narrow alleyways, the sound of rain on thin jackets, and jazz leaking from basement cafes. Tonight the pavement holds heat, even after the last train leaves, and apartment windows glow quietly like tired stars across the city. Maybe that's why I keep writing songs for seasons that disappear too fast, because music stays a little longer than cherry blossoms ever can. Before the
Should have listened more carefully to those fading spring evenings. So let this trumpet keep crying until the morning slowly arrives, before summer completely takes over and these quiet nights dissolve.
April felt like 3 days. A short breeze through an open window, before the city turned humid again and summer lights filled the streets. I waited all winter for this season, for quiet mornings and thin coats, for coffee steaming beside rainy windows and jazz drifting through small cafes. But spring barely touched the city before disappearing into warm nights. Cherry blossoms fell too quickly, like unfinished thoughts in the wind. April felt like 3 days, too short to hold properly. One moment the air smelled gentle, then suddenly everything changed. The bookstore near the station already turned the air conditioner on, and strangers walked with iced coffees under skies that should still feel cold. Across the river after sunset, looking for the old spring breeze. The warm air wrapped around the bridge, like July had arrived early again. A trumpet echoed softly tonight from somewhere above the alleyways. Lonely notes floating through neon signs and tight apartment windows. Maybe every season now is rushing towards something else, leaving quiet people behind, still searching for slower days. April felt like 3 days, a beautiful thing passing quickly, like hearing your favorite song from another room at midnight. I miss the small details already, the sound of light rain on jackets, the cool subway platforms at night, the pale colors of evening skies. Now the city feels brighter somehow, louder and harder to breathe inside. Even midnight coffee tastes different when summer arrives too early. Still I keep these moments carefully, pressed between old songs and memories, because short seasons become precious when you know they won't stay long. So let the jazz keep playing tonight, slow enough for disappearing things before summer burns through the windows and April fades completely away. cafe opened all its windows, but warm air rushed inside. April disappeared somewhere last week, without anyone really noticing. The streets were full of green too quickly, cherry blossoms already gone, and the songs that sounded like springtime now feel like memories already. I bought a thin cardigan this year, thinking there would still be cold nights, but it stayed hanging near the doorway, like something waiting for the wrong season. We skipped spring again, straight into sleepless summer evenings. The city changed clothes overnight, while I was still looking for soft wind. At the bus stop after midnight, people wipe sweat from tired faces. Even the moon above Seoul tonight feels brighter and heavier somehow. A slow trumpet played in my earphones while I crossed the quiet intersection. For a moment I could almost believe spring was still somewhere nearby. We skipped spring again, before the rain could even settle, before long walks beside the river, before pale mornings and light jackets. Maybe the world is speeding up, or maybe we stop slowing down. Everything disappears so quickly now. Even seasons don't wait anymore. I remember years when spring stayed longer, when cafes smelled like wet flowers, when cool wind entered subway stations and nobody rushed summer to arrive. Tonight the air conditioner hums softly beside old jazz records spinning slowly. Outside, humid neon lights flicker across apartment windows, still awake. And somehow this warmth feels lonely, like something arrived too early, like opening a letter before it's finished, or saying goodbye before the song ends. We skipped spring again, but maybe that's why it hurts beautifully, because the shortest seasons leave the deepest memories behind. So pour another cup of coffee, let the trumpet keep crying tonight, before summer completely takes over, and these quiet feelings disappear. Summer came too early this year, before spring could finish speaking. The wind changed somewhere overnight, and suddenly the city felt warmer. The cafes brought out cold drinks, while cherry blossoms still remained. Pink petals falling beside sunlight that already felt like June. I kept waiting for rainy evenings, for soft jackets and slow walks home, but the nights became humid too quickly, time was rushing ahead again. Summer came too early this year, and somehow that made me lonely, because beautiful seasons feel shorter the older the world becomes. A trumpet echoed from upstairs in the old jazz bar near the station. Warm vinyl spinning through dim lights while tired strangers drank quietly. Outside buses crossed wet streets, reflections shaking under neon signs, and warm air drifted through alleyways long after midnight arrived. I remember springs from years ago, cooling near the Han River, coffee steam against cold windows, and conversations that lasted longer. Now the city barely pauses, everything moving too fast. Even the flowers seem surprised by how quickly the heat arrived. Summer came too early this year, before I could collect my memories, before I could stay out late enough to really feel spring leaving. At the convenience store tonight, the freezer hummed like distant rain. Office workers stood silently outside, holding ice cans against tired faces. A girl walked past in short sleeves, carrying flowers wrapped in paper. And for a second the warm wind smelled like spring again. Maybe seasons are becoming fragile, passing through us more quietly, leaving only songs behind to remember what they felt like. Summer came too early this year, still I keep searching for spring inside old jazz melodies and late night city reflections. So let this record play slowly before another night disappears, because sometimes the shortest seasons become the longest memories. The cherry blossoms barely stayed, just a few in the afternoons. Coffee getting cold beside the window before I could even call it spring. The jackets became too warm, the nights lost their soft breath, and somewhere between April and May, summer quietly walked in again. I miss the season called almost, the air before the heat begins, the shy sunlight on the subway glass, the slow evenings full of pollen and jazz. We said goodbye too early again, like friends leaving before the last song. Spring in Korea never really stays. It waves once, then under bridges, but the city already sounds different. Air conditioners humming at midnight. At the convenience store near my street, ice cream freezers started singing. Teenagers laughing in short sleeves while I still wanted spring evenings. The old cafe played soft jazz tonight, a trumpet floating through warm air. I looked outside for falling petals, but only neon lights were there. Maybe seasons are becoming strangers, passing faster every year. Maybe we're all too busy lately to notice spring was even here. I wanted one more rainy cafe day, one more long walk under pale skies, one more excuse to wear a thin coat and disappear into quiet streets. We said goodbye too early again, like letters unfinished on the desk. Spring in Korea never really stays. It waves once, then disappears. So before summer burns too bright, let's leave this song behind. One last memory of spring before the heat takes everything. And when July arrives too loudly, with sleepless humid nights, I know I'll still remember these quiet disappearing lights.